Welcome to Purchase to Profits. I'm Seth Ferguson. Our guest today has investments in over $125 million worth of real estate and currently has more than 1,300 units in his portfolio. If that wasn't enough, he is the founder and president of 5 specialty medical clinics located throughout South Carolina. He is the founder of the Multifamily Investor Nation with 34 groups and over 2,000 members across the world. He is also the co-host, along with his wife, of the daily podcast, Tough Decisions for Entrepreneurs. Dr. Dan Handford is key principal of Handford Capital. Dan, welcome to Purchase to Profits. It's great to have you on the show.
Glad to be here, Seth. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, so am I. You've amassed quite a good collection of businesses in real estate, so I'm really looking forward to this. So I know you have a lot of stuff going on right now. Do you mind just filling in our viewers of where you started from, your background?
Sure. So, my background is primarily as an entrepreneur. So I have several different businesses, like you mentioned on the introduction there. I have 5 non-surgical specialty medical clinics that are focused on non-surgical orthopedics across South Carolina. And I have a couple other online businesses where we do non-brick and mortar. So those are kind of the medical offices are kind of my brick and mortar kind of specialty clinics and businesses. And then I also have some online companies that I've had for over 10 years that continue to produce revenue and cash flow for me. So that's kind of, I don't know how far back you want me to go, Seth, but that's kind of what my current focus is right now.
That's great. So you have multiple sources of income. Where did real estate factor in? Like, did you have real estate at the start, or did real estate come a little bit later for you?
Sure. So the real estate was a thing that came on later when I started to make money, because once I started to make money, I started to have to write these very painful 6-figure checks to the government and was getting a little frustrated because, so you spend all year long busting your behind and working as hard as you can, and then having to pull out the checkbook at the end of the year and write that check. And it was quite painful. And so because of that, I started to look for ways to, reduce my taxable liability legally. Obviously I'm not want to do anything, illegal, but being able to find ways that, I guess the biggest example that everybody knows about is Donald Trump, right? Everybody always says, well, how does he not pay any money in taxes? And he's this billionaire, right? Well, it's because he invests in real estate. He invests in communities. He invests in areas that, provide him with lots of tax advantages that he can carry over year to year to year, and he reduces his taxable liability. And so for real estate, that's really what came into play for me is to be able to help to reduce my taxable liability.
Okay, so right off the bat, you were looking to take advantage of what real estate had to offer. At what point, with your goal for real estate, at what point did you transition from just taking advantage of those tax benefits to wanting to multiply your capital in there? Was there a transition period?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in a different position, Seth, because I've been asked, and I've been to several real estate seminars and various things like that, and you've probably been in them yourself, where they have you raise your hand and how much would $5,000 more a month allow you to be able to quit your job and do what you want to do and change things for you, and for me in my position, yes, would I like an additional $5,000 a month? Sure, but it's not going to change anything that I'm currently doing. It's not going to have a major lifestyle change for me. I already have, control over my schedule and various things like that. And, I can pretty much do what I would like to do. And money, I'm not saying money is not an object, because it is. It's not like I have billions of dollars, but, I don't live above my means, and I live in a lifestyle that I'm happy with, and so to me, I didn't get into real estate for the actual cash flow portion of it. It was mainly from the tax advantages side of things. And then, oh, by the way, you could also increase your income from it. So right now, is my real estate making more money than my businesses? No, it's not. My businesses actually fund more of my real estate than the other way around.
Yeah, and I think your position is quite similar to lots of investors on the passive side, where they've built a successful enterprise and they're looking to take advantage of all the benefits that real estate has, like the tax breaks and all that stuff,
Well,
and preserving capital, right? Because
yeah, I was going to say another thing that people have asked me is why don't you just become a passive investor? Like, why do you want to do things actively? And for me, I don't have to do active real estate stuff, but so in February of 2018, I stepped down from being the boots on the ground, day-to-day person managing stuff in my clinics. So I did that, and I'm 35, so I pretty much retired, if you will, at 35, and sat at home for a week and a half, drove myself nuts and drove my wife nuts, and she told me I had to go do something. And I wanted to make sure that anything that I was doing, I was going to be doing something that was bigger and better and greater than I'd already done. And real estate was that ticket for me, but not just any real estate, multifamily, 100, 150 units or more real estate. I wanted to make sure I could exponentially grow things on a large scale. And because of my track record in business, it has allowed me to do that as well.
Yeah. So you would say in your growth on the medical clinic side, I'm assuming you grew that through mergers and acquisitions. Is that correct?
No, I actually grew them from scratch.
Wow.
So every single one of them I built up and grew them from scratch. And I own them 100%. So we don't have any debt on the practices. And we got a few leases on X-ray and, some C-arms and various things, some other types of medical equipment. But there's no debt on the practices at all. And it was because of my online businesses that allowed me to be able to open these practices debt free. And like I said earlier, I don't live above my means. So I don't, try to, take a bunch of money out of the businesses. I do reinvest a lot of the money we make on the businesses back into the businesses and helping them and allowing them to grow and developing the personnel and various things like that. And so that's what I did to be able to grow those as fast as they did. And, those clinics are, usually, cash flowing within the first 3 or 4 months, a positive return on the investment, because of the systems and the procedures and processes that we have in place in those clinics that we perfected over the years. And so, even our accountant, was wondering, are you sure you made this amount of money in this clinic this year? Because it only hasn't even been open for 9 months. We're like, yes. And he's like, okay, I just want to make sure because you're going to have to pay taxes on that, right? And I'm like, yeah, but I mean, because most accountants are seeing losses on businesses for the first 2 or 3 or 4 years, and ours, it's different. But it's because we've already perfected those systems and are duplicating them in these various clinics.
Yeah. So, and you mentioned systems and processes. How did your work in building those businesses transfer over to real estate in terms of process-oriented growth?
Sure. So, I mean, there's got to be a process and a system in place for everything that you do. And so that doesn't just mean in these medical clinics. It doesn't mean in my online businesses. It's in every aspect. So when you start to go into the real estate side of things, I actually just had a phone call this morning on a property that we took over 2 weeks ago and was asking those very similar questions to the property management company. I'm like, all right, what kind of checklist do you have in place to make sure things are being done on the property that need to be getting done? So one simple thing is just we acquired a property that has internal or interior hallways instead of the exterior hallways. And so you actually go into almost like a hotel. You go in the interior, walk down the hallways to get to your unit inside. I actually like that and prefer that more than the exterior just because it's a little bit nicer. But you also have the extra expense of having to clean those. And so one of the things we had to do is we had to get some quotes to figure out what it was going to cost to have those cleaned. And, one of the considerations was, well, why don't we just have the maintenance people clean them? And why don't we just have the leasing agents clean their office and that be it and save that expense? But I know from my business experience and running businesses that when you're paying somebody 15 to 20 bucks an hour to do a higher paying job, it's cheaper for you for the amount of work that you're getting to actually have somebody with a lower labor rate do those types of tasks. But either way, whether you have somebody that's in the office or outside doing those things, you have to make sure that you give them what your expectations are. You can't just say, hey, go clean it once a week. because then it's going to get to like Friday at 4:30, and they're going to clean it once a week by just going in and doing something to say that they cleaned it. But there's got to be a checklist in place that says, what are the expectations for being able to clean this particular unit?
For sure. So let's talk a little bit about your goals for your real estate business. So real estate's kind of helped save the marriage because you're not at home all the time, annoying the wife. What do you see? How do you see yourself growing in real estate? Like, what's the end result you want to accomplish?
Sure. Well, I mean, my goal is to find other people that are similar to me, where they have some of this extra cash that they want to be able to keep more of, and being able to help them invest in real estate to get those depreciation, offsets to show losses on the properties. Even though you're making money and you're cash flowing off these properties, you're bringing money every month or quarter, you're able to actually at the end of the year show a loss. And so my goal is to exponentially grow our portfolio to find investors who are in similar positions to be able to put cash into some of our properties, into some of our deals, to be able to join me in doing that very same thing. And so right now, we're recording this at the end of 2018. Our goal for 2019 is to get another $100 million in our portfolio. And right now, we're working on a deal that will get us halfway there in the first quarter. So, we're going to probably have to adjust that goal a little bit. And, we're going to, the goal is in a 5-year period of time to try to get to $1 billion in under management. And so it's a big goal. I don't think it's actually big enough. I think it should be bigger. But we will get there. It'll just take some time.
Yeah. You just have to throw a couple extra zeros at the end. And
here's the thing is, one of the people that I follow, whether you like him or not, is Grant Cardone. And that's one of the books that he wrote was the 10X rule. That was what really changed me and my trajectory. And what his whole, I even heard him just this past week talk about goal setting for 2019. And one of the things that he mentioned is when he was coaching a client, and when he's sitting there trying to sit there to decide, all right, this year in 2018 we did 5 million in revenue. Next year we want to do 5.3. He's like, well, that doesn't create any more questions and cause you to answer any more difficult or different questions when you go from 5 to 5.3. But he said, when you start to go from 5 million to 10 million or 15 million, he goes, those are probably goals that you won't achieve, but it'll help you be able to create questions that you wouldn't have actually needed to answer because your goal wasn't big enough. So when you set bigger goals, you actually start to answer questions that allow you to reach a higher level than where you are. And so even though you might not reach that $10 or $15 million goal, you'll start to work towards that. But I would rather come short of a $10 million goal than a $5.3 million goal. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, for sure. And I think too, the systems you have to put in place at the start are going to be different with that higher number goal, because you're thinking long term, right? And that's only going to help you in the short term, for sure. So in terms of how you got, you were looking at real estate for the tax advantages. Was your first deal on the passive side, or were you one of the general partners on your first deal?
Sure. The first two deals was on the passive side.
Okay.
So, and the reason why I did that is because I wanted to see how other people handled investors, because I'm an investor first, even in these deals that I'm putting together. And I tell all of our investor partners that very same thing, that, I will turn down a deal, even though that I might not make as much money on it, because I wouldn't personally invest in it. And so I want to make sure that the deals that we put together are deals that I want my money in, and not just because I want an acquisition fee or some sort of back end or whatever. I want to make sure the deal is good and solid and will be able to hold through long term. And those are all questions and considerations that have to come into play. But also, I think one of the biggest errors and biggest mistakes that GPs make is lack of communication to their investors, making decisions about distributions, about how they run a property, about how things are being done without informing their investors. The investors need to be updated when decisions are made that affect them. And they don't need to know, like, for example, this cleaning thing. Like, they don't really need to know about whether or not we chose to have the office staff clean or our outside cleaning company. That's not stuff I'm talking about. I'm talking about major things that can maybe affect the returns or affect distributions or various things like that. And so when we set out to put our systems in place for how we communicate with investors, we communicate with them on a regular basis. So once a month, every property, every investor on each property will get an update from us on that specific property to let them know how that property is doing. They don't have to call us. They don't have to reach out to us to get that information. We're going to proactively provide that information to them on a monthly basis and once a quarter, giving them access to the files for the T12 and the rent roll. So they want to see the financials. We have that openness and that transparency for them to be able to see that. And one of the other things that I like as an investor is cash flow. So I don't want to have to wait once a quarter or twice a year. I want monthly cash flow coming into my mailbox or into my bank account. And so that's one of the things we put into place too, is that every one of our investors and every one of our deals receives monthly distributions so that they're not having to wait for every quarter. I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of our investors continue to stay with us right now and continue to invest deal after deal, is because they know how we work. They know they like our communication style, and they trust us, and they also believe in us. From my background as an entrepreneur and as a business person, sometimes you look at that and think, entrepreneur kind of has maybe a negative connotation to it sometimes, but it really doesn't. It's one of those things where, right now I'm with my clinics, we're managing a $10 million plus budget every year with those clinics. That's nothing compared to these small budgets that we're dealing with on these complexes. And so being able to have that business acumen tied in with the real estate, I think, is very important. And it was what attracts a lot of investors to us.
Yeah, and you mentioned the communication with investors. So you're talking with your investors once a month, then every quarter. So that's 16 touches with your investors, and a GP who's only calling their people maybe once a quarter, you're just blowing everybody else out of the water in terms of communication with the client. That's huge.
Well, and investors reinvest sooner, especially when you're getting started, when you do distributions faster. We actually had a particular property that we helped capital raise for, and they did things a little bit differently than the way we wanted them to be done. And it affected how those investors that were in on that deal invested in our future deals based on that. And so even when we're raising money or being a capital raising partner for somebody else's properties, we have to take that into consideration as to how they handle their investors, because it'll directly impact how we can, interact with those investors in the future. And so we still have some investors that have only invested in that one deal, and it's because of the lack of communication in that particular deal, and we can't get them to invest in another deal because they don't feel like we're communicating enough. But it's not even our fault. We have our hands tied because all we're doing is communicating to the investors. But when we don't get that communication in, it's kind of hard. Plus, that particular property is only doing quarterly distributions right now. So again, there's several of those types of factors that come into play that has made us make decisions about how to handle investors and various things like that.
Yeah, and when you are making those decisions, is it safe to say that you have the end goal, so your $1 billion goal in mind for every decision you make?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have the goal in mind because we know that if we want to grow to that scale, we need to make sure we handle our investors properly, because if we don't, then we're always having to find more and more investors. And again, we're going to always still need to find more and more investors. But when you start to count up and not have to have a holes in the bucket dropping out, it's a lot easier to build up your investor base versus having a bunch of holes in your bucket and you're trying to fill it faster than they're leaving.
Yeah. So let's take a look at your portfolio right now. Is there one deal that stands out as a deal that really brought you closer to that goal, or was it a game changer for you?
Sure. I mean, I personally think that the deal we just closed on 2 weeks ago is a phenomenal deal, and it is a deal that will be doing much better than we actually projected. So when we do our underwriting, when we do our projections, one of the things that we're always looking for is being conservative. And I know everybody says that sexy word of, oh, I'm conservative. And sometimes you look at their underwriting, you're like, I'm not sure what they meant by conservative, but that's not conservative in my book, But when we first underwrote this particular deal and we actually analyzed the financials on this project, we actually were showing up like a 35-40% IRR, which is phenomenal. But obviously, when you start to underwrite a deal and you see those kind of numbers come in, that's something you can't present to investors, that they're going to get a 40% IRR. So you look at the deal and you say, well, where can I make it more conservative? And so you have to start to expand the entry and the exit cap rate, not the entry, but the exit cap rate, expand it a little bit so you can actually reduce and make it more conservative. So when you start to expand that cap rate and it reduces your return to a more reasonable return that investors can believe in, then it shows you that it is a more conservative deal. So those are the types of things that we look at. And this particular property, there's a lot of things on this property that we're going to be doing to it and that are projected and that are going to do much better. And it's going to be a phenomenal return for investors and a phenomenal return for return for the investors, but phenomenal hitting the projections and hitting the returns sooner than we originally projected. And one of the things that we looked at on this particular deal, which is what we do on most deals, is we're actually coming in on our projections into like the second or third position on as far as being the market leader in the rents in that area. And so if you wanted to we're on our underwriting, we don't want to be number one, right? But when we go to market and try to get the rents, we're going to try to be number one, right? Yeah. But we might have to lower that a little bit to get into the right position or whatever, based on the market conditions at the time. But we want to try to be the market leader if we can. But in our underwriting and when we're trying to do our projections, we're going to try to shoot for lower. And if we can shoot for lower rents than what we think we can actually get, that makes that deal even more conservative as it is. And so being able to look at the numbers like that particular deal is a phenomenal deal. It's a lot of work deal because we're having to do a heavy lift on it. We're doing about a $13,000 to $14,000 a door renovation, interior and exterior. And so it'll be a heavy lift, 12 to 18 months of renovating all these units and getting them, back up and stuff like that. But it's going to be a phenomenal deal and phenomenal returns for investors.
Yeah. Hey, how did you find the deal? Was it a broker deal or was it directly with the vendor?
So this one was a brokered deal, and we originally put an offer on it and then got into best and final and then lost the deal. And then 4 weeks later, got a phone call from the broker, and they were able to offer it to us because the original buyer was inexperienced and couldn't get the job done. And so they turned it over to us. We said, yes, let's do it. 60 days later, we closed.
Perfect. And when you first saw it, what really jumped off the page at you, with the blinking light saying, hey, but buy me? Was it, the IRR? What was it, just the location? What sort of things were jumping off at you?
Whenever we first look at a property, one of the things we always try to do is think outside the box and think outside the box to a point where nobody else is thinking that way. And so on this particular property, there is a large amount of value add opportunities that were not being done that we can implement right away. So to give you a couple of examples, the main leasing office, this is a smaller 130 unit complex, and it has a 4,000 square foot leasing office. Cool. And you first look at that and you go, why do you need 4,000 square feet for that small of a property? But this particular leasing office was the house of a physician before investors back in the 1980s took it over. So they actually bought the property as a house with a bunch of trees around it, right off of a main thoroughfare, and it's in Greenville, South Carolina. So there's a main highway that it sits on. 34,000 vehicles per day are passing this property every day. And they took out some of the trees and then left some of them and then built up apartments around it. And so there's this large 4,000 square foot leasing office and then these 130 units that are surrounding it. And so we, of course, looked at that and we're like, I wonder if there's a way to add some additional units because you don't need 4,000 square feet. And what we found out is we can actually add, at the time we were thinking 8, but we can only probably add about 4 additional units to the property it used to be a house. So it's like kind of like a little wing shape. So there's the leasing office that would be here, and off the wings, there's actually bedrooms, 2 bedrooms on either side. And so we can go in there and add, they already have bathrooms. So there's bathrooms. You just make them 1-bedroom studios. And now you've added 4 units to the property and no one else is thinking about that. And the nice thing about that property is that's not even in our underwriting. That's all just cherry on the top and stuff like that. So there's things like that when you look at a property and you'll go, there's just so many value add opportunities here. And it's right off of the interstate, but right off of a major highway that connects Spartanburg and Greer, Taylor's to Greenville downtown, which is a very hot area right now. It's about 10 minutes down the road. It's right next to Bob Jones University. I grew up in the market. one of our other partners, Brandon Abbott, he actually spent 15 to 20 years in the market. So to say we know the market very well, we do. We know it very, very well. I drove by that property for 27 years as I was growing up and know it very well. And so to be able to see that that part of Greenville is in a revitalizing state and to be able to buy it right now, it's a phenomenal deal. And so we actually bought it for about $10,000 a door less than what the market per door price is right now. And we even have had other brokers that didn't even list this property that were talking to them, at different, meetups and events. And they were like, oh yeah, I heard about you guys getting that deal. And that's a phenomenal deal. You guys got a steal of a deal on that property. And, obviously the people who were in that property could have gotten more for it, but they didn't spend any time trying to fix anything up or renovate anything or, add anything to it. They got 10,000 units and they're looking at this small 130 unit one going, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for us to be able to go in there and really make some exponential changes, it's going to be a great deal. And so we're really excited about it. It's going to be a lot of work. We're dealing with it quite a bit right now because we just took it over 2 weeks ago. So there's a lot of systems and procedures and processes we're putting in place with it. And the nice thing about it is it's only an hour and a half for me. So I can be there within an hour and a half if I need to. Same thing with one of my other partners. He's an hour and a half. And one of our other partners, Danny Randazzo, he's about 2.5 hours away from it. So we're all very close to it in regards to being able to just drive there and be there within a day if we need to.
Yeah. And at, 13 or 14 grand a unit in terms of rehab, like you're going to basically have a brand new product almost by the time it's done.
Yeah, this will be one of the very few properties in the market that will have had a full, complete turn like that. And we're putting a lot of emphasis on luxury amenities inside because right now it's a C-class property. And so we're going to be taking it and pretty much changing over the entire tenant base to a B-class property or B-class tenant. And so there will definitely be some changeover. There'll be some frustrations and some headaches and stuff like that. The nice thing is that our investors don't have to worry about that. They just get the cash flow every month.
Sure.
But there's definitely some things we have to manage, because even in our underwriting and our projections, we have a 9% vacancy throughout the entire period. And so that means we can't have any more than about 11 or 12 units at any given time vacant, even as we're turning them. But we've already got the labor in place. We're in the process right now of finalizing some of the materials, and we'll be able to turn a unit in about 10 to 14 days. So we'll be able to turn those over fairly quickly.
Yeah, no, that's a pretty quick turn. That's good for you guys. That's great. So in terms of, when you originally lost the deal to when you got it, were you still in communication with that broker, even though you weren't awarded the contract initially? Like how did they come back to you?
Sure. Well, without giving away too much information,
I
don't want to get somebody else in trouble.
Yeah.
I'll just say that we heard through the grapevine that the deal might not be going through.
Yeah.
And so we decided to, reach out and put a feeler out to the broker who had it and just say, hey, wanted to see if you had any other opportunities that were available. And oh, by the way, what's up with that deal in Greenville? Did everything go through with that? And we're hearing it more and more right now because of the way the market is changing and some of the, interest rates are changing. So it's, throwing off some people's underwriting when they start to get a deal under contract, or not under contract, but under LOI. And then they start to get to that point of signing the PSA and things just, go out of whack. And so we actually have another deal right now that's happening, that same thing, where a couple of weeks later we get a phone call from the broker and, this person's not being able to follow through. They're being kind of a pain. Do you want it? And so those are always good phone calls to have, but I think it also has helped us understand that we need to always stick with our projections and stick with our numbers, because we could have paid more and got still a great return on this deal we bought in Greenville. But why? There was only one or two other people ahead of us that outbid us, but they gave it to us because they knew we could close, and they knew that they weren't going to have to deal with anything crazy. And I think that's also what has helped us get this call back from this other broker on this other deal, which this is also another deal in Greenville that we're working on, that the owners of the two properties are good friends, and they talk about it. They've talked about how easy it was to work with our group and getting the deal closed. And so brokers talk, sellers talk, so your reputation in this space and in this market, I think is very crucial and very vital. And, it's one of those things that you should protect a lot and not be offended if somebody doesn't want to capital raise for you or whatever from, a reputation standpoint. Not to say that you might have a bad reputation, but people have a reputation that they must uphold, and they can only align with a certain number of people that they know can, handle things the way they would handle them if something happened to the property or, whatever the case may be. But with this particular thing, we stuck with our original number and made the broker's life easier, and then also made the seller's life easy. And then the sellers talking to these other sellers, and the brokers that aren't even brokers in the same groups are talking to each other and talking about how easy it is to work with our group. I think that all, bodes well for you as you move forward into 2019 and into the future.
For sure. So is the plan for you guys to do a refi once most of the units are turned? Like, what's your game plan?
Sure. So we started off this one with a bridge loan. It's a 3-year bridge with a floating rate. We did buy a rate cap, and then we also have 2 1-year extensions that are optional to extend past the 3-year term. And the first 3 years are interest only as well. And so the reason why we wanted to have the opportunity to hold on to this for the full 5 years is because you never know what the market's going to do. But we have the option to hold this thing for the whole 5 years if we want to. But the goal is to get it renovated in the first 12 to 18 months, have it show some stabilization for the next 3 to 6 months, get either a refinance out of it in 24 months, or at the same time, look at getting a broker opinion of value, that BOV, to see, is there an opportunity to possibly put it back on the market and sell it and see what happens there. So obviously those are decisions that will be made once we get to that point to kind of see where the market conditions are, where things are looking like. But at that 18 to 24 month period of time is really when we will be making those assessments and making those decisions as to whether we refi or if we sell it, and we can sell it and still project and still get the returns that we were projecting for our investors sooner rather than later. Obviously the investors like that, and it also bodes really well for them to get into a future investment at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that that timeline really shows how great of a deal this is, just because now the hold periods are extending a little bit. They're trending longer. So I'm really looking forward to talking with you maybe in another year or so to hear how things are going.
Sure.
With that.
Love to.
Yeah. So you're doing lots of work with your multifamily investor nation. I know when you got started in the real estate, you already had your businesses set up. With some of your members, how has real estate getting involved in it really changed their lives?
You're talking about the members of the multifamily investor nation?
Yeah.
Well, I think the biggest thing I've seen in the multifamily investor nation group is people being able to not be stuck to a 9-to-5 job. I mean, obviously, when you start to talk about going into real estate full time, a lot of people will make you believe that it's you don't do a lot of work and you just sit back and collect the cash. And as a passive investor, I would say yes, that is how it works. But as an active real estate professional, you're active in there, and you do have more control over your schedule, and you have the ability to structure your time more than being able to just say, I got to go to work from 9 to 5 and then come home frustrated and tired and not want to spend time with your family. So I think that what it has allowed the most for our members is people to be able to leave a W-2 job and that 9 to 5 and being able to create their own schedules and have a little bit more control over their life and their schedule. And that allows them to have more control over their free time with family, spending time with friends, self-development, those kind of things. So I think the biggest thing is control of your time and control of your schedule, that it has really benefited the most. And obviously increasing the bottom line and increasing income is a byproduct of investing in real estate. But not everybody who gets into real estate makes a bunch of money. If they don't follow the right footsteps and hire the right mentor and actually take action, then they're not going to be able to be successful in it. So success in real estate is all about what you put into it at the same time.
Yeah. So if somebody's looking to learn more about the Multifamily Investor Nation or yourself, where can they find you?
Sure. So, if you're interested in becoming one of our, passive investing partners, you can go to passiveinvesting.com. It's a website that you can go there and find out a little bit more about our group and what we're doing. You can also go to the multifamilyinvestornation.com website. You just go to multifamilyinvestornation.com. We also have a summit that we do twice a year. You can go to mfinsummit.com and find out more information about that summit. It's an online virtual summit, so you can do it from the comfort of your home. We also have some other opportunities for networking and various things that are surrounding that. But those are the two best opportunities to reach out to me. If you have questions for me, you can shoot me an email. I'm at Dan, DAN, at passiveinvesting.com. So just shoot me an email if you got any questions or anything like that. We're glad to jump on a call with anybody or discuss anything further.
Oh, that's great. And we'll be sure to put all the links right down below this video so everybody can check it out. So Dr. Dan, thank you so much for your time today and for doing this interview. I definitely learned a lot.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad to be here, Seth, and look forward to continuing to follow you as you continue to progress as well.
That's great. And to our viewers, I wish you well in your journey from purchase to profits. See you next time.